The paracord bit into Lieutenant General Patrice Banks's wrists as Officer Derek Martinez yanked the knots tighter around the massive oak tree. Campers throughout Pine Ridge Campground froze mid-conversation, plastic cups of coffee suspended halfway to their lips, as they watched two HOA police officers secure a woman in hiking boots and cargo pants to the ancient trunk. "This'll teach you to steal from private property," Martinez grunted, his breath hot against Banks's ear as he cinched the final loop. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before taking what doesn't belong to you." Banks remained silent, her dark eyes scanning the tree line where 12 Girl Scouts crouched behind a fallen log, their bright orange bandanas barely visible through the underbrush. She had trained them well during their 3-day survival workshop. Stay hidden. Stay quiet. Wait for the all-clear signal. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Officer Janet Kowalski stepped forward, her hand resting on her service weapon. The radio on her shoulder crackled with static, but she ignored it. "You deaf or just stupid?" The morning sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across Banks's weathered face. At 52, she bore the quiet confidence of someone who had commanded thousands of soldiers across 3 combat deployments. Her graying temples caught the light as she finally lifted her gaze to meet Kowalski's glare. "I gathered deadfall," Banks said, her voice steady despite the rope cutting into her circulation. "Public land, fallen branches, no theft occurred." Martinez laughed, the sound sharp and cruel in the morning stillness. "Public land, lady. You're standing on Pine Ridge HOA property. Every stick, every rock, every blade of grass belongs to our residents." He gestured toward the pristine camping spots dotting the hillside, each marked with small brass plaques. "You and your little gang of street kids don't belong here." Behind the log, 10-year-old Keisha Washington pressed her face into the dirt, her small fists clenched. She had never seen anyone treat Miss Banks like this. Miss Banks, who taught them how to read a compass, how to purify water, how to build shelter from nothing but branches and determination. Miss Banks, who bought their camping gear with her own money and spent weekends showing them that the world extended far beyond the concrete boundaries of their neighborhood. The campground had fallen eerily quiet. A family of 4 packed their RV with deliberate slowness, the father stealing glances at the unfolding scene, while his wife herded their children toward the vehicle. An elderly couple sat frozen at their picnic table, their breakfast growing cold as they watched the uniformed officers circle their captive like predators. "Your permit doesn't cover this section," Kowalski continued, pulling a folded paper from Banks's backpack. "Says here you reserved spots 12 through 15. This is spot 18. She waved the document dramatically. "That's trespassing, theft of firewood, and—" She paused, studying Banks's calm expression. "Resisting arrest." "I haven't resisted anything," Banks replied quietly. "Yet." Martinez unslung his phone, opening the camera app with a theatrical flourish. "Smile for the livestream. Criminal. My followers love seeing justice in action." The phone screen filled with Banks's image, her dark skin contrasting sharply against the oak's rough bark. Martinez held the device at arm's length, grinning into the front-facing camera. "Good morning. Pine Ridge Community Officers Martinez and Kowalski here, bringing you another episode of Cleaning Up Our Neighborhood." His voice took on the exaggerated enthusiasm of a game show host. "Today, we caught this lovely lady stealing firewood from your private property. Question is, what should we do with her?" Comments began flooding the screen in real time. Banks watched the scroll of text, noting the mixture of shock, encouragement, and barely concealed racism. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly, but her voice remained level. "My identification is in my front pocket. Perhaps you should verify who you're detaining before proceeding." Kowalski laughed, the sound harsh as breaking glass. "Oh, we know exactly who you are. You're another inner-city troublemaker who thinks our community resources are your personal playground." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "But this isn't downtown anymore. Sweetheart, this is our territory." From the tree line came a barely audible whimper. 12-year-old Marcus Thompson had crawled forward for a better view, his scout handbook still clutched in his trembling hands. The chapter on emergency protocols seemed laughably inadequate for this situation. What do you do when the adults with badges become the emergency? Martinez continued his live stream, panning the camera across the surrounding campground. "Now, folks, you might be wondering why we don't just arrest this trespasser and be done with it. But see, we believe in community education. Sometimes you have to make an example to send a clear message about respecting private property." The rope around Banks's wrists had cut off circulation to her fingers, but she focused on breathing steadily, maintaining the calm that had carried her through ambushes in Afghanistan and boardroom battles in the Pentagon. Her watch showed 0847 hours. In 13 minutes. Her absence would be noted. In 15. Protocols would engage. "Where are those kids of yours?" Kowalski scanned the forest with predatory interest. "We saw them scatter like roaches when we arrived. Probably stealing more firewood, knowing their kind." This time, Banks' composure cracked slightly. Her voice carried the sharp edge of command authority that had once silenced hostile senators during budget hearings. "The children have done nothing wrong. Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, our quarrel is with all of you," Martinez replied, still filming. "These camping programs are just another way to bring crime into our community. You people never learn to respect boundaries." The phone's comment section exploded with reactions. Some viewers expressed shock at the officer's language, while others cheered them on. Martinez basked in the attention, his chest puffing with self-importance as the viewer count climbed toward 300. "Should we call child services?" Kowalski mused aloud, still searching the tree line. "Leaving minors unsupervised in the wilderness sounds like neglect to me." "The children are under proper supervision," Banks said firmly. "They know the safety protocols. They know to stay hidden when adults become unpredictable." Martinez lowered his phone, his expression darkening. "Unpredictable lady. We're the most predictable thing in your day. We're the consequences you've been running from your whole life." He drew his service weapon, holding it casually at his side, not quite pointing it at Banks, but not quite pointing it away either. The metallic click of the holster snap echoed through the suddenly silent campground like a gunshot. "Here's what's going to happen," he continued, his voice taking on the measured cadence of someone savoring their power. "You're going to stay tied to this tree until the property manager arrives. He's driving down from the main office to assess the damage you've caused. Then you're going to pay restitution for the stolen firewood, plus cleanup fees, plus processing costs." "How much firewood could she have possibly taken?" called out a voice from across the campground. A middle-aged woman in a University of Michigan t-shirt stood beside her tent, her arms crossed defiantly. "Those are just dead branches." Kowalski turned toward the woman, her hand moving instinctively to her weapon. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return to your campsite and mind your own business." "This is my business," the woman replied. "I'm a taxpayer, and I'm watching you abuse your authority." "Dr. Patricia Kellner," Banks said quietly, recognizing the voice. "Professor of Environmental Law at U of M. We met at the Veterans Career Fair last spring." Kellner's eyes widened as she focused on Banks's face, noting the calm dignity despite the restraints. "My God, General Banks!" The title hung in the morning air like a challenge. Martinez and Kowalski exchanged glances. uncertainty flickering across their features for the first time. General Martinez forced a laugh. "Right, and I'm the Secretary of Defense." But doubt had crept into his voice. He lifted his phone again, the live stream still recording, though his earlier bravado had dimmed noticeably. Banks watched their confusion with professional detachment. In her decades of military service, she had learned to read the exact moment when arrogance began to crack under the weight of reality. These officers were approaching that moment, though they didn't yet realize it. "My identification," she repeated calmly. "Front left pocket, military ID, State Department credentials, Pentagon access badge." Kowalski hesitated, then reached toward Banks's pocket with obvious reluctance. Her fingers found the slim leather wallet, extracting it with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. The first card she pulled bore the distinctive blue and gold of a Department of Defense identification. The photo showed Banks, in dress uniform, her chest bearing the rainbow of ribbons that marked a distinguished career: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Action Badge. "Lieutenant General Patrice M. Banks," Kowalski read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "Commander, 82nd Airborne Division." She looked up at Martinez, her face pale. "Derek, we need to—" "Fake ID," Martinez interrupted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Anyone can print those." "The hologram is authentic." "Doctor," Kellner called out, moving closer despite Kowalski's warning glare, "I've seen enough military IDs to recognize the real thing." She pulled out her phone. "General, I'm calling base security." "That won't be necessary," Banks replied, "but I would appreciate if you documented this incident. The live stream should provide sufficient evidence, but additional witnesses are always helpful." Martinez's phone showed over 500 viewers now. The comment section, a scrolling cascade of shock and outrage. Someone had identified Banks within seconds, posting links to news articles about her recent promotion to division commander. Another viewer had already screen captured Martinez's face and was demanding his badge number. The morning sun climbed higher, throwing harsh shadows across the campground. In the distance, the rhythmic thrum of helicopter rotors began to echo off the surrounding hills, so faint it might have been mistaken for the rumble of distant thunder. Banks heard it first, her trained ear picking out the distinctive signature of a UH-60 Blackhawk still miles away. Her lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. "Officers," she said quietly, "I strongly recommend you untie me immediately and contact your supervisor." Martinez's laugh came out forced and brittle. "Why?" "So you can run back to whatever stolen valor fantasy you're living, lady. I don't care if you have fake military IDs, fake badges, or fake anything else. You stole from private property, and you're going to face the consequences." He raised his weapon toward the tree line, pointing it generally in the direction where the Girl Scouts remained hidden. "In fact, let's make this educational. Kids, come out now, or we start treating this as a hostage situation." The helicopter sound grew stronger, though still distant enough to dismiss. "But Dr." Kellner had noticed it too. Her head tilted as she listened to the approaching aircraft. "Those are military rotors," she said, loud enough for the officers to hear. "That's not a police helicopter or medical transport." Kowalski fumbled with her radio, finally acknowledging the constant stream of calls she had been ignoring. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. We have a situation at Pine Ridge Campground." The response crackled through immediately, the dispatcher's voice tight with urgency. "Unit 7, we've been trying to reach you for 15 minutes. We have multiple calls about your live stream, and we need you to respond immediately." "What live stream?" Kowalski glanced at Martinez, who was still holding his phone but no longer narrating. The viewer count had climbed past 1,000, and the comments had shifted from entertainment to alarm. "Officer Martinez's social media account," the dispatcher replied, tension obvious in her tone. "Sir, please tell me you didn't actually detain a military officer." The helicopter sound was unmistakable now, a heavy thudding that vibrated through the ground and rattled the windows of nearby RVs. Campers emerged from their sites, shading their eyes as they scanned the clear morning sky. Banks' watch showed 0902 hours, right on schedule. "Delta 779er, this is Watcher 6, she called out, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being heard over battlefield noise. "I am secured and require immediate extraction." Martinez stared at her in confusion. "What the hell are you doing?" "Geneva Convention, Article 17. Banks replied calmly, "Name, rank, service number, and date of birth. That's all I'm required to provide under international law regarding prisoner detention." "Prisoner detention." Kowalski's voice climbed an octave. "We're not at war." "Tell that to the 12 children you threatened with weapons." Banks replied, "Tell that to the woman you bound to a tree without due process. Tell that to the community you've terrorized with your badges and your bigotry." The Black Hawk appeared over the southern ridge, its dark silhouette unmistakable against the blue sky. It moved with the purposeful efficiency of a military aircraft on mission, banking slightly as it circled the campground in a standard reconnaissance pattern. Martinez's livestream exploded with activity. Viewers were screen capturing everything, posting to social media platforms, tagging news outlets and civil rights organizations. Someone had already created a hashtag #CheckYourFreeBanks. "This isn't happening," Martinez muttered, lowering his weapon as he watched the helicopter settle into a landing pattern in the adjacent field. "This can't be happening." The aircraft touched down with practiced precision, its rotor wash sending dust and debris swirling across the campground. Campers retreated to their vehicles as uniformed figures emerged from the cabin, their movements crisp and purposeful. Colonel James Mitchell stepped out first, his jump boots striking the ground with authority. Behind him came a full military police team, their equipment and bearing leaving no doubt about their identity or purpose. "General Banks," Mitchell called out, his voice carrying easily over the slowing rotors. "Watcher 6, this is Reaper 1. We have visual confirmation." The MPs spread out in a standard formation, their hands resting casually on their sidearms. Not aggressive, but absolutely unmistakable in their intent. They had come for their commander, and nothing would prevent them from completing that mission. Martinez and Kowalski found themselves surrounded within seconds, the professional competence of the military police making their own earlier performance look like amateur theater. Colonel Mitchell approached Banks directly, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger, as he took in the rope restraints and her obvious discomfort. "Ma'am, are you injured?" His voice carried the clipped professionalism of a career soldier, but his eyes blazed with fury. "Negative, Colonel. Minor circulation restriction, but no permanent damage." Banks nodded toward the tree line. 12 Girl Scouts under my supervision are concealed in that sector. They need wellness checks and immediate extraction to a safe location. "Already handled. Ma'am, we have medics standing by." Mitchell turned to Martinez, who still held his phone like a shield. "Officer, I need you to lower that device and step away from the general immediately." This is insane," Martinez stammered. "We're local law enforcement. We have jurisdiction here." "Actually, you don't." "Doctor," Kellner stepped forward, her lawyer's instincts fully engaged. "The moment you detained a military officer without probable cause, you triggered federal jurisdiction. These MPs have every right to intervene. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos approached with wire cutters, her expression grim as she surveyed the rope restraints. "Sir, permission to free the general." "Granted." Mitchell replied, "Document everything first. Photos, measurements, witness statements. This is now a federal investigation." The paracord fell away, and Banks flexed her fingers slowly, working circulation back into her hands. Red welts marked her wrists where the rope had bitten deep, and Santos immediately began photographing the injuries from multiple angles. "General," Colonel Mitchell said quietly, "I have base legal on standby. They want to know if you require immediate medical attention or prefer to debrief first." "Medical can wait," Banks replied, rolling her shoulders to work out the stiffness. "But I want those children transported to safety immediately. They've been traumatized enough." From the tree line came a small voice. "Miss Banks, is it safe now?" Keisha Washington stood at the edge of the clearing, her orange bandana askew, but her young face determined, behind her. The other Girl Scouts emerged one by one, their survival training having kept them hidden and safe throughout the ordeal. "It's safe now. Girls," Banks called out, her voice warm with relief and pride. "You followed protocols perfectly. I'm very proud of all of you." The children ran toward her, their pent-up fear finally finding release in tears and tight hugs. Banks knelt to their level, checking each face, counting heads, assessing their emotional state with the practiced eye of someone who had seen trauma's effects on young minds. Meanwhile, Martinez and Kowalski found themselves at the center of a very different kind of attention. Colonel Mitchell's MPs had efficiently secured the scene, taking statements from witnesses while the officers stood in shocked silence. "Officers Martinez and Kowalski," Mitchell announced formally, "you are being detained pending federal investigation into civil rights violations, unlawful imprisonment, and assault on a military officer. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda warning continued as campers throughout Pine Ridge pulled out their phones, recording everything. Martinez's live stream was still running, now broadcasting his own arrest to nearly 2,000 viewers. Dr. Kellner approached Banks as the general continued comforting her Girl Scouts. "General, I want you to know that what happened here was completely unacceptable. As a member of this community, I'm appalled by those officers' behavior." "Thank you, Professor," Banks replied, never taking her attention from the children. "But the real heroes here are these 12 young ladies. They showed more courage and discipline today than some soldiers I've commanded." Marcus Thompson looked up at her with wide eyes. "Miss Banks, are you really a general?" Banks smiled, the expression transforming her weathered features. "I am, Marcus. But more importantly, I'm your mentor, your teacher, and your friend. That hasn't changed." "Will you still take us camping?" Keisha asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Absolutely," Banks replied without hesitation, "though perhaps not at Pine Ridge." Colonel Mitchell finished the arrests and approached Banks with obvious relief. "Ma'am, we have secure transport ready. The children's families have been notified, and base medical is standing by for examinations." "Excellent work, Colonel," Banks replied, standing slowly. The rope marks on her wrists were already darkening to purple bruises, but her bearing remained erect and dignified. "What's the status on my equipment?" "All personal effects have been secured as evidence," Mitchell replied. "Legal says you'll get everything back once the investigation concludes." Banks nodded, then turned to address the gathered crowd of campers and onlookers. Her voice carried easily across the clearing, trained by years of addressing troops in battlefield conditions. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I want to thank those of you who spoke up today. Dr. Kellner, in particular, showed the kind of moral courage that makes our democracy strong. When you see injustice, you have a responsibility to act. Scattered applause broke out among the campers, but Banks held up a hand for silence. I also want you to understand that what happened here today is not representative of all law enforcement. The vast majority of police officers are honorable people doing a difficult job. These two individuals chose to abuse their authority, and they will face the consequences of that choice. She gestured toward her Girl Scouts, who had formed a neat line beside her. But the real lesson here is about courage. These young ladies demonstrated that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite being afraid. They followed their training, stayed safe, and emerged stronger. Martinez, now handcuffed and seated in the back of an MP vehicle, stared at Banks through the window. His live stream had finally ended, but the damage was done. Screenshots and screen recordings were already spreading across social media, and news outlets were beginning to pick up the story. The helicopter engines spun up as the MPs prepared for departure. Colonel Mitchell helped the Girl Scouts aboard, ensuring each child was properly secured before turning to Banks. "General, there's one more thing," he said quietly. "The base commander wants to speak with you immediately upon return." "Expected," Banks replied. "This incident will require full documentation and likely congressional notification." She took one last look around Pine Ridge Campground, noting the families still watching from their campsites, the scattered camping gear from their interrupted morning, the deep gouges in the oak tree's bark where the rope had been secured. "Colonel," she said thoughtfully, "I want a full investigation into Pine Ridge HOA's law enforcement contracts. If they're employing officers like Martinez and Kowalski, there may be a pattern of abuse." "Already in motion, ma'am," Mitchell replied. "JAG has requested all personnel files and incident reports dating back 5 years. Banks nodded and climbed aboard the helicopter, settling beside her Girl Scouts for the flight back to base. Through the window, she watched Pine Ridge Campground shrink below them, already planning the federal civil rights investigation that would follow. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant General Patrice Banks stood before a packed auditorium at Fort Bragg, addressing an audience of military personnel, community leaders, and members of Congress. The Purple Heart pinned to her dress uniform caught the stage lights as she adjusted the microphone. "The events at Pine Ridge Campground have sparked important conversations about accountability, authority, and the protection of civil rights," she began, her voice carrying the same steady confidence that had sustained her through decades of service. "But I don't want to be remembered as the general who was tied to a tree. I want to be remembered as the soldier who helped create positive change in how law enforcement and military personnel interact with our communities." In the front row, 12 Girl Scouts sat in their dress uniforms, their faces beaming with pride. Keisha Washington raised her hand, and Banks nodded for her to speak. "Miss Banks, what happened to the campground?" Banks smiled. "Excellent question. Keisha, Pine Ridge HOA has agreed to transfer management of the campground to the Department of Veterans Affairs. It will become a permanent outdoor education center, specifically designed to serve inner-city youth programs." The auditorium erupted in applause, but Banks continued. "More importantly, the new facility will be staffed by veterans who understand the value of mentorship, discipline, and respect. No child will ever again be threatened or intimidated for trying to learn survival skills or connect with nature." Marcus Thompson stood up, his scout handbook clutched in his hands. "Are you still going to teach us camping?" "Every weekend that I'm not deployed," Banks promised. "And when I am deployed. Colonel Mitchell has volunteered to continue the program." Mitchell, seated in the second row, nodded emphatically. The investigation had revealed his own passion for youth development, and he had already begun planning expanded programs for at-risk children throughout the region. As for Officers Martinez and Kowalski, they had been terminated from Pine Ridge HOA security and faced federal charges for civil rights violations. Their live stream had become evidence in their own prosecution, and both men ultimately accepted plea agreements that included community service, working with the very youth programs they had tried to intimidate. The transformation of Pine Ridge Campground took 6 months. Veterans with construction experience volunteered their time, building accessible facilities and safety equipment. The old brass plaques marking exclusive camping spots were replaced with simple wooden signs bearing inspirational quotes from military leaders, civil rights pioneers, and youth advocates. On opening day, Lieutenant General Banks stood beneath the same oak tree where she had been bound, now marked with a small memorial plaque. This tree stands as a reminder that courage grows strongest in difficult soil, and justice blooms brightest after the longest winters. Dr. Kellner, now serving on the campground's Civilian Oversight Board, read the inscription aloud to the assembled crowd. General Banks chose these words herself, she announced. She wanted future generations to understand that even the darkest moments can become foundations for positive change. The Girl Scouts, now expanded to include boys and children from multiple communities, spread out across the campground for their first official survival skills workshop. Banks watched them work with quiet satisfaction, noting their confidence, their teamwork, their natural leadership skills. Young Keisha Washington approached with a perfectly constructed debris hut, her technique flawless, despite using only materials found on the ground. Miss Banks, look what I built. Outstanding work, Keisha, Banks replied, examining the shelter's construction. That would keep you warm and dry in any weather. Did you learn this in the Army? Banks knelt beside the girl, her voice warm with memory. I learned it from my grandfather. Who learned it from his grandfather? Survival skills aren't about the military. Keisha, they're about understanding that you're stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and more capable than anyone else believes. She gestured toward the other children, scattered across the hillside in small groups, each focused on their individual projects. Look at your fellow scouts. 6 months ago, they watched adults with badges and guns try to intimidate us. Today, they're building shelters, starting fires, purifying water, and learning that they have the power to take care of themselves and others. Keisha nodded solemnly, then brightened. Miss Banks, when I grow up, I want to be a general too. Then you will be, Banks replied without hesitation. Not because I say so, but because you have the courage to dream it and the determination to make it happen. As the sun set over Pine Ridge, casting long shadows through the trees, Lieutenant General Patrice Banks gathered her scouts for the evening briefing. They sat in a circle around a properly constructed campfire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. Today, we learned about shelter construction, she began, following the same format she had used for decades with military personnel. Tomorrow, we'll cover water purification and navigation. But tonight, I want to talk about the most important survival skill of all. What's that? Marcus asked. Character, Banks replied. When you're lost in the wilderness, your compass will guide you home. When you're thirsty, your water purification tablets will keep you healthy. When you're cold, your shelter will keep you warm. But when you face injustice, when you see someone being hurt or threatened or humiliated, only your character will guide you to do the right thing. She looked around the circle, meeting each young face in the firelight. Character means speaking up when others stay silent. It means helping when others turn away. It means standing strong when others try to make you small. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks dancing into the star-filled sky. In the distance, the lights of Fort Bragg twinkled like earthbound constellations, a reminder of the larger community that supported and protected these moments of peace. 6 months ago, 2 adults with badges tried to make me feel powerless. Banks continued. They tied me to a tree, threatened children, and broadcast their actions to the world, thinking they were teaching us a lesson about our place. She smiled, the expression visible in the firelight. But they were wrong. They weren't teaching us anything. We were teaching them. We showed them that courage doesn't require a uniform or a weapon or a title. It just requires a choice to do what's right, even when it's difficult. Keisha raised her hand. Miss Banks, what if we're scared? Then you're normal. Banks replied, I was scared that morning. Scared for you girls. Scared about what those officers might do. Scared that I couldn't protect you while I was tied up. She paused, her voice growing stronger. But being scared doesn't mean being helpless. You followed your training, stayed safe, and proved that even children can be heroes when they need to be. The evening briefing concluded with the scout promise, their young voices carrying across the campground with surprising strength. As the children headed to their tents, Banks remained by the fire, adding logs and adjusting the coals for optimal overnight burning. Colonel Mitchell approached through the darkness, his footsteps quiet on the pine needles. General, everything secure for the night. All present and accounted for. Colonel, she replied. 12 future leaders, safe and sound. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the fire settle into steady flames. Around them, the campground hummed with the quiet sounds of a peaceful evening tent zippers, muffled conversations, the distant hoot of an owl. Ma'am, Mitchell said finally, I've been thinking about that morning, about how those officers assumed they knew who you were, what you represented, what you deserved. Banks nodded, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. They saw what they expected to see, an older black woman with inner-city children, someone they could intimidate without consequences. But they were wrong about everything. Mitchell continued, your rank, your background, your connections, your ability to fight back. No, Colonel, Banks said quietly. They were wrong about something much more fundamental than that. She turned to face him, her expression serious in the firelight. They were wrong to think that any of those things mattered. Wrong to think that my military rank made their actions worse, or that my connections made them more serious, or that my ability to fight back made them more deserving of punishment. Mitchell frowned, not following her logic. They shouldn't have tied anyone to that tree. Banks explained, not a general, not a private, not a civilian, not a child, not because of who I am, but because of who they are. Because we've decided, as a society, that people in uniform have a responsibility to protect and serve, not to humiliate and terrorize. She gestured toward the tents where her Girl Scouts were settling in for the night. Those children didn't need a general to protect them. They needed adults who remembered their oath, their duty, their basic human decency. The fact that I happened to be a general was just luck, good luck for them. Bad luck for Martinez and Kowalski. Mitchell considered this, his expression thoughtful. So, the real victory wasn't that they picked on someone who could fight back. The real victory, Banks replied, is that we've created a system where their actions have consequences regardless of their target, where live streaming abuse backfires because people care about justice, where military police respond immediately because protecting civilians is our mission, not our favor. The fire began to die down. and Banks carefully arranged the remaining logs for a slow, steady burn. The children would sleep warm and safe, watched over by adults who understood the weight of responsibility. "Tomorrow we start navigation training," she said, changing the subject. "I want each scout to be able to find their way home from anywhere in these woods." "Yes, ma'am," Mitchell replied. "And ma'am, thank you for letting me be part of this program. These kids are going to change the world." Banks smiled, her weathered hands warm from the fire's heat. "They already have, Colonel. They already have." As midnight approached, Lieutenant General Patrice Banks made her final rounds of the campground, checking tent stakes and safety equipment, ensuring the fire was properly banked, confirming that her young charges were settled for the night. The routine was identical to countless nights in military camps around the world, but the stakes felt somehow higher here. These children would grow up remembering this place, these lessons, this moment when they learned that courage could triumph over intimidation, that justice could emerge from injustice, that even the strongest oak tree could become a symbol of resilience rather than restraint. In her own tent, Banks pulled out her field journal and began writing the day's report. Not the official after-action review that would go to Pentagon briefers and congressional committees, but the personal record she kept of each child's progress, each breakthrough, each moment of growth. Day 127 of the Pine Ridge Youth Leadership Program. She wrote, 12 scouts, ages 8 to 14, completed advanced shelter construction with minimal supervision. Keisha Washington demonstrated exceptional technical proficiency and natural teaching ability. Marcus Thompson overcame his fear of heights during rope work. All participants show increasing confidence and leadership potential. She paused, her pen hovering over the page as she considered how to capture the day's deeper significance. "The true measure of today's success," she continued, "is not what these children learned about survival skills, but what they learned about their own strength. 6 months ago, they watched adults try to break their mentor's spirit. Today, they built shelters strong enough to weather any storm." Banks closed the journal and settled into her sleeping bag, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called to its mate. The fire crackled softly outside her tent. 12 children slept peacefully under a canopy of stars, dreaming of futures bright with possibility. Lieutenant General Patrice Banks had commanded divisions, briefed presidents, and led troops through some of the most challenging military operations of the past decade. But lying in a simple tent beside a campfire, surrounded by the quiet breathing of sleeping children, she knew she had found her most important mission. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, new opportunities to nurture the leaders these children were destined to become. And when they faced their own moments of testing their own oak trees, their own officers with badges and small minds, they would remember that courage grows strongest in difficult soil, and justice blooms brightest after the longest winters. The fire burned down to glowing embers, and Pine Ridge Campground settled into the peaceful silence of a community at rest. In the morning, the Girl Scouts would wake to another day of adventure, another chance to grow stronger, another opportunity to learn that they were braver than they believed and more capable than anyone else imagined. But for now, they slept under the protection of the stars and the watchful care of a general who had learned that the greatest victories are not won on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when young minds discover their own power to change the world.